Welcome to the very first episode of Careers and Coffee Talk, where real people are going to spill the beans about their real career journeys, one cup at a time. I'm Laura, and I started this series because I believe the most meaningful stories truly come from the past we didn't plan, the pivots we never expected, and the moments where we're all just figuring it out as we go. Careers just don't always go the way that we plan, and honestly, that's the part that really makes them worth talking about. So grab your coffee or your beverage of choice and settle in for some honest, quick, casual conversation about all the twists and turns that shape us. Let's get into it. So Paul Huang, genuinely one of my favorite people. So excited to have you here, not only as our first guest on Careers and Coffee Talk, but also as the unwitting uh, influence behind this whole idea. So welcome. So glad to have you.
Thanks. It's great to see you. It's great to have this chat and have this coffee conversation. I have my coffee and I'm ready to go.
Always. And same here. Cheers. What are you drinking? What's your coffee order?
So normally I just have a Starbucks, but my mother-in-law just got back from Switzerland. So she
Ooh.
brought some coffee back and I ground it up this morning
Ooh.
and made a
Oh, I
cup
love
and
that.
it's really good. It's really good.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm a latte girly, but oat milk. Oat milk only, no dairy.
So I used to never drink coffee, Laura, and we had a kid. That was 20 years ago. And
And that's where it all started.
we were fortunate enough that my mom was willing to watch her. So I would get up at like 5 in the morning, drive all the way down. We live in Vienna, Virginia. We drive all the way down to Herndon, drop her off. And of course, my
Hmm.
mom is a traditional like Chinese mother. So she's like, "You look so tired. Let me make you some breakfast."
Let me make you
And
some
it
coffee.
and it was not regular breakfast. We're talking about like a gourmet,
Like a whole
homemade
spread.
porridge, like all these
Oh,
things. And then after about a week or so, she said, "You look so tired. You need coffee." And I had never drunk coffee ever. And she shoved a cup in my face. And 20 years later, I have at
Still
least
going
a
strong.
cup a day.
Are you an afternoon coffee drinker too, or is it just morning?
It doesn't affect me anymore. So it's whenever. Sometimes you need a break at work.
Like
So
inject it into my veins.
yes, yeah, yeah,
Whatever you got to do. Sometimes whatever you got to do to get through the day, right?
that's right.
Well, Paul, we used to work together, and I
Yes,
want to dive into your whole career. I know we spent what's 17 years you spent at FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Since then, the Department of Interior
yes,
for a few years, and now you are the Vice President of Federal Civilian Business at OST. And we're going to dive into all of that. But something I did not, I was thinking about this as I was preparing last night for this conversation, and something I realized I didn't know about you
yeah,
is, your LinkedIn only goes back so far, your bio only goes back so far, right? And we'll share your whole bio with everyone in the description here so that people can read all about all the things you've accomplished and all the things you've done. But nobody ever includes like when I was 15, I was a busser at the Olive Garden, right? Like
right.
which I was not. I never got into food service, but I was curious, like what was Paul Wong's first job?
I've had every grunt job you can imagine. Um, it was working at a fast food place, Roy Rogers, over the summer. So, well,
Oh my
I would
gosh, their
actually back
cornbread.
up way before that. Well,
Okay.
cornbread and the bread and the roast beef. But before that, my parents immigrated here, and I when I was four,
Hmm.
and have worked every kind of blue collar job you can imagine. We're entrepreneurs, so
Yeah.
we were always working, whether
Yeah.
it was mowing lawns or helping my dad in his store kind of stock shelves, things like that. But my like first like non-family job was
Uh-huh.
Roy Rogers, cashiering at Roy Rogers. But pretty soon it was also dunking the fried chicken at night. And there's a fun story there, Laura. Like um, you get entrepreneur yourself because you're poor and don't have a lot of money, and food is, as a growing teenager, was
Hmm.
important. So
Very
and
important.
you get tired of the food at Roy Rogers because you work there every day, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So there was a rule, like maybe Roy Rogers shouldn't hear this, but like before 9 o'clock, before we were closing at 10, you weren't allowed to fry another basket of chicken because they didn't want a
Okay.
lot of leftovers.
Sure.
So you set up a rule like that, 9 o'clock, of course, teenagers at 8:59, we would
8:59.
we would drop a gigantic thing of chicken, not for ourselves to eat, but actually to go trade next door at the 7-Eleven for hot dogs
Oh.
and pizza and for those that smoke
Oh.
cigarettes. So we had a little deal going with
There you go.
our
You got to get
neighbors.
creative.
That was my
I
first
love
job.
it. I was going to ask you what was the biggest takeaway or the biggest lesson from that, but maybe it was like how to market your what you have, right? Like how to show your value.
Uh, you can definitely be innovative and creative and bootstrap. But actually, if I think back to that first job, um, it is teamwork and it's volunteering
Hmm.
for stuff. And I don't think
Yeah.
that's changed in my life.
Yeah.
Like, you're always a part of a team. So you got to like the colleagues you're around. We had a lot of fun
Hmm.
together. And then the second thing was um, someone needed help in the kitchen. I was a cashier, but you go help in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Someone says, hey, someone's got to clean the bathroom. No one wants to do that job, but every once in a while you just go do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I
And
can
you
see that
learn
about you too.
things
Yeah.
and you learn things and it creates opportunities, right? And
For
no matter
sure.
what role you're in.
Yeah. So Roy Rogers to FEMA. Talk to me about that. How did you end up there? There had to
uh,
be there had to be a path, right?
yeah, long story short, I mean, I graduated from Virginia Tech. I did really well in school. I credit my wife because we met as freshmen. And
Ooh.
before that, I was kind of lost. And then she gave me purpose. And I ended up doing really well in schools, had a lot of job opportunities. And sometimes that's just timing too. It was a good
Hmm.
market when we
Yeah.
graduated. So I think I had 16 job offers out of school. And I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Um, so I ended up going to consulting, Anderson
Okay.
Consulting, now Accenture. And that was my true first professional job.
First, like big boy job.
Yeah, yeah. And I felt really lucky. I mean, some of the luck is that you're surrounded by amazing people. And I would say one of my favorite bosses of all time was my first boss at Anderson Consulting. She really believed in me. I was a terrible public speaker, but she would just keep putting me in front and I'd like profusely sweat. I'd stutter and she'd say, you're briefing the directors again next week and you'll have to figure it out. So, I mean, she just had a real belief in me and I learned a tremendous amount. But from there was the dot-com boom. So I went to chase the big dream of becoming a dot-com millionaire. Went to a small dot-com, it actually got bought out, but I had joined a little bit too late in that cycle. So it was good enough money to maybe not work a year, but it wasn't
Okay.
good enough money to like never work again.
Yeah, right.
It forced me to think about what I really wanted to do though. And
Mm.
we do, my wife and I would volunteer with kids especially. And I thought about teaching because it's something that I think is really rewarding and something I really enjoy.
Yeah.
So I thought about a complete career shift, but then I thought there's practicality too. I need to make
Sure.
money. I'm
Right.
down the path.
I almost went down the same
So,
path, so I get
right,
it.
right. And you've shared your story too. And
Yeah.
you start thinking about those things. And I thought, well, I'll put that on hold. And it's funny because it's come full circle, I think. Um, but I went to various companies. I went to my wife's company at Dewberry and got me into the FEMA world. And from going to from a dot-com to an engineering firm, it wasn't quite for me. One of
Right.
the folks one of the companies we work with was Michael Baker Corporation, and they offered me to be more of a team lead, a leader. And I took that opportunity and we bid on a huge FEMA contract and we won it. So coincidentally, it's funny, I was just talking to my daughter about this. I've never really had to put together a resume that much. You can see my resume,
Sure. Yeah.
but it's usually because you work hard and you know people and you network and you build a reputation. But our client turned to me and said, hey, we have this position open. I think you would be great at FEMA. Why don't you check it out? And of course, I said all the right consulting type things, Laura. Like, thank you so much for thinking about me. What an honor for all the opportunities for you to think about. And I turned to my
Hmm.
wife and I said, no way, I'm joining the federal government. Like,
Not a
and
chance.
and guess what? We were expecting our first child, and she said, fewer hours, more predictable, steady work.
Oh,
You should really
Paul.
think about it. You should really
Is
think
that what
about it.
is that what you thought FEMA was going to be?
I interviewed, I got the job, I took it for all those reasons.
Yeah.
And
Work-life
guess,
balance and
yeah,
stability and all
yes,
the things. Yeah.
guess what happened 20 years ago? There's a
Let's
little
see.
hurricane, a little
Uh-huh.
hurricane called Katrina.
Katrina, that's right.
And oh
It's
my
hard to believe
gosh,
that's almost 20 years ago now.
I remember it because my wife was like, "You're going to miss the birth of our first child." And this was
Yeah.
not the reason why we went. But, working really hard for survivors, trying to
Hmm.
accomplish a mission, I fell in love with it. I caught the
Yeah.
bug.
Yeah.
And I didn't miss the birth of our first child.
Thank
And
goodness.
I enjoyed the the adrenaline and the rush of helping people, but more so like I wasn't thinking about profit and loss. I was thinking about how to
Sure.
help people.
Yep.
And that just changed the whole trajectory of my career. I mean, I loved it. 20 years of public service, I never thought I'd leave.
Yeah. So, I mean, you took a big risk. I mean, it wasn't, it sounds like going back to you guys talking about this move, right? Back then, that it was, you thought it was going to be something totally different than what it really
Yeah.
was. And it really, like you said, it changes, that experience changes things for you. Is there a moment that stands out that was kind of like an aha, like this is where I'm meant to be, like this is where I should be? Because it was a big change, right? From the consulting world to public service to, very specifically the mission at FEMA.
Yeah.
What's can you think of, is there a particular experience that you think of that like really stands out for you?
I wish there was one, Laura. It's
Yeah,
this you start kind of doing the work
sure.
and enjoying the people you work with,
Hmm.
and then seeing your work in the field, and you start going, gosh, like I can't imagine doing anything else. But
Yeah.
as I think about that question, there was one moment where I was a first year senior executive. I was asked to be the deputy of the National Flood Insurance Program. It was a big step up from my GS career, and I've been lucky to have great bosses.
Yeah.
And my boss said, "You need to get out to the field more
Mm.
because we do work in Washington D.C. on policy and regulations and things that we may never see the impact of, but
Sure.
affect thousands and thousands of people, if not millions of people." And to
Absolutely.
ground that with going out and actually seeing what our work is doing and
Firsthand on
where
the
we can
ground.
do it
Yeah.
better, that was transformative for me,
Hmm.
especially in a new senior executive position. So I remember Louisiana floods. We went out there and we did a claims adjustment. We walked through a home. But before that, it was the realization that at FEMA, we're the chief empathizers. Everyone has a story, and part of the healing process is for them to tell that story.
Sure.
And I remember the lady telling us the story of her grandkids getting in a boat in a kayak, kayaking to their house because the water levels were rising so much, and rescuing her, and then looking around her home and going, "Oh my gosh!" Like those grandkids were there mucking it out, and I felt useless. So we were carrying. I helped volunteer some muscle power and like, hey, let's carry the couches out. But hearing them going, we were so worried about her, and we didn't know. We couldn't talk, but we knew the water levels were rising. So we borrowed our neighbor's kayak and literally kayaked out there, and then got her on the mattress and drag her to
Gosh.
safety. And so the material stuff seemed less important, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not a deeply religious person, but what was powerful to me in that, and I actually took a picture of it, was their family Bible. Everything was the smell of the disaster, the
Oh, yeah.
mold, the just the devastation. But this
Hmm.
Bible sat on kind of on a table and was just drying out while everything else was kind of being thrown away.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought, wow, like you can't replace that. Something
Right.
that you're passing down generation from generation. So
Yeah.
uh,
That's
those
really
things,
powerful. Yeah.
yeah, it's part of catching the bug. You go, it's good to shape policy, but to shape it and see what you're doing, but also to come back and say we got to do it better and
Yeah.
constantly improve, and for the survivor, not for ourselves.
Yeah. That and an experience like that really changes how you think of things, how you look at things. Um, another thing I was thinking, Paul, as you were talking is, you're known for a lot of things. One being that you're an incredible storyteller. And I've always appreciated about you your ability, one of the things that we used to work together, right? I wrote for you. I
Yeah.
wrote speeches and executive communications for a time, part of that time with you. But your ability to take like policy and really humanize, the impact and what it means to put it to bring it to fruition. And I remember a story that you told one time on work that we were doing about it had to do with shopping for blackberries at the store. You're going to know
Yes.
exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But it was a very specific, kind of policy shift with the administration at the time and the work that we were doing around equity and you humanized it. You brought it to life by explaining a story, and maybe I'll let you tell the story, but it was just about like this simple act of a sale at the grocery store and someone who couldn't take advantage of the sale because they didn't have access, right?
Right. Right. I mean, I'm a huge believer in equity, and part of that is kind of my background and the folks I've been surrounded with. And that story is really prominent in my mind because it's during COVID. And like, my kids are at home. My daughter will look back and go, "Oh my gosh, what a terrible time." She was
I
like,
think a
"Dad, you're
lot of
my
us
best
will.
friend." And as a dad, I was like, "Yes, but I shouldn't be your best friend because they
Right,
were all
right,
here."
right.
But they would volunteer every Monday because they didn't have school on Mondays. We're going to look
Hmm.
back and we're going to like, back in the day, we went to school, hiked through the snow, and they didn't have Monday school during COVID. But they started volunteering at a food bank, and it was at a church across from a grocery store. So of course they couldn't drive. Then I would drive them. I'd put on my mask and I'd go to the grocery store. And I remember a pint of blueberries on sale. It said something like $1.99 with a digital coupon, like $3.99 regular price, something like that. And older lady, picked up the pint of blueberries, and I did too. And of course, I self checked out, but she was checking out somewhere else, and I could hear a little bit of an argument. And she said, I don't have that app. I don't have a digital
A
coupon.
smartphone, right?
And the cashier said, you need one to get this 199 pint. And she said, fine, I don't want it. And that was really unfair to me. Like, so we at FEMA were talking about how do we innovate? How do we do more technology, remote claims, remote things, remote individual assistance stuff. But what if you didn't have access to the
Hmm.
technology? We were assuming, and I think this happens in policymaking today, that we want to advance everything, but
Sure.
we serve the whole American public. And there is a difference. There are folks that don't have the internet,
Yeah.
and smartphones are a luxury, not just a common good. And it made us think about our policy differently. So I remember that story because I do feel like innovations happen when you observe other things
Yeah.
outside of our workspace, and that was part of it.
It's important to keep in mind, right? I think that's really helpful to think about, but also, just your ability to connect with people, through storytelling, through conversation. I know one thing, anytime we would have meetings, even just like weekly meetings or with the team, you would always start by, I think, and I think this is very intentional, but I kind of want to hear this from you. You would always ask, like, how was your weekend? Tell a story about something you did with your kids, the volunteering, or, maybe they had
Right.
basketball that weekend or something. And you would always kind of start by sharing, not just diving right into like, okay, what are we doing?
Right.
But I wonder if that, if the storytelling, if the connection with people, does that come really natural to you? Is that like kind of organic to who you are? Or is that an intentional, very deliberate? Deliberate sounds manipulative. I don't think it's that at all. But is that something that you've kind of had to like build on and hone as you've grown as a leader? Or is it something that comes naturally to you?
It comes natural to me, but I had to develop it at work
Yeah.
because some will say, well, that's not a valuable use of work time. Or as I was growing my career, I was afraid to ask, hey, Laura, how was your weekend? Or how are the
Yeah.
kids? Because I didn't know if it was the right boundary at work.
Sure. And some people can
And
be more private. Yeah.
right. But then I read this book. I mean, I had a boss once that made me read a leadership book almost every quarter. And then we would talk about it. And I hated that because I was a slow reader and I was like, oh, like, but,
You're like, I didn't ask to join this book club.
that's right. Right. But I love this one book. It was Patrick Leonce's Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And it was kind of this fable because you could read it in, well, one, it was short and it was a story. So you could read it very quickly. Um, but the core to a good team, kind of use the opposite in terms of the description of the book, but the core to leadership and a good, strong team was trust. So if you flip to the back of the book, it actually gives some tips on how to build trust in a team. And one was have a question of the week when you start your team meeting. And I always caveat it because there are boundaries at work. Share as much or little as you want.
Sure.
But we do this to build trust. And it could be like, Laura, what's your favorite candy? By the way, what's your favorite candy?
Ooh, I'm not a big sweets person, but I do like dark chocolate and peanut
Yes.
butter. So Trader Joe's, by the way, none of this is an endorsement. This is all personal opinions. None of this is an endorsement of any like product or organization or service or anything, but Trader Joe's dark chocolate peanut butter cups.
Oof.
So good.
So many people love those. I've never
Oh
tried
my
them. I need to
gosh.
do that.
I'm gonna get you some.
Right. But like we actually started rotating in our team lead meetings when I started becoming more senior in my management career. We'd have team lead meetings and we'd start with a question of the week and some of them, and then we actually rotate the question of the week. So Laura, you're on point for the next question.
Sure. Yep.
And some were simple, like your favorite candy, and some were really deep, like what was the last time you were really afraid? Right. And again, people shared as much or a little. But why do we do this? You need a team that has trust. And trust is we are whole people, not just work people. So when you start getting to know folks as a genuine person, and Brene Brown talks about genuine leadership all the time, I'm a huge believer. We're whole people. We have vulnerabilities. We have lives outside of work, right? When you start getting to know folks like that, one, you'll run through walls for each other, right? Like, hey, Laura's got to stay late tonight, and I don't want her to miss dinner with her kids. So I'm going to chip in tonight. I'm going to go see how I can help. But two, you can have real conflict, right? Because the reason you should have meetings isn't just to meet, it's actually to debate something. But if everyone kind of is afraid to speak up because they're afraid of retribution or they don't trust that their opinion's going to matter, right? Like, so it helps with healthy debate and someone to say, Paul, I think you're wrong. And I love that. But folks aren't comfortable that if you don't have that foundation of trust.
Yeah. You've got to
So
build that. Yeah.
yeah, one, I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And two, I think there is a dividend that's paid in the formation of a team. And it's something I'm trying to do in my new job.
Yeah. Well, talk to me about that. And I don't want to skip over your whole chapter at DOI. I know that was a big move for you too. And by the way, I kind of think, it's interesting because careers, we look at them as very linear, but they're very like they're just, I don't know, they're almost like chapters of like, I spent, and I think a lot of us at FEMA too, we think about like, I mark times by like disasters,
Yeah,
2017 disaster season, that was kind of a big moment for me. But, bringing you kind of forward in your career, going to DOI, like that was a big move, right? After being somewhere, anywhere for 17 years.
right.
That's a big shift. Whole new network of people, right? A whole new set of issues. So kind of walk me through like you go from FEMA to DOI to now the private sector.
Yeah. Uh, it is healthy. Change is difficult, Laura. Like
Yeah.
my family and I used to go to the same brunch place every Sunday, and we were going through some reorganization thing at work, and everyone was frustrated about it. And I remember saying to my wife and saying, like, I don't get it. Change is healthy, and sometimes it opens new doors and there's new learning. And she looks at me and says, I know what you're going to order today. And then like I gritted up and I tried something else, and I was like, oh, it was
Should have stuck with what I
uncomfortable.
knew.
Right. Um, and I think it's good to have a mirror and find that person in your life or your career. I'm blessed to have Jean. Like my
Yeah.
wife is my mirror.
Yeah.
So coming off of COVID, working with you in resilience in a different role at FEMA, a very senior role, I thought, what's next for me? And I was
Hmm.
very comfortable because I loved the people and I knew the mission. to
Yeah.
just go back to the National Flood Insurance Program where I was originally at before kind of taking a detail. And someone we worked with at FEMA called me and said, "Hey, I'm going over to the Department of Interior and we have a career deputy position. I think you might be great for it." And I rewind to that first job. I said all the same things. "Thank you so much for thinking about me." In fact, we were driving to the beach, so he was on speakerphone in the car. I said, "Thanks for thinking about me. Like, what an honor. Like, I'm not sure I'm qualified, but I'll check it out. Thank you." And I hung
Hmm.
up the phone. I turned to my wife and I said, "No way. I love FEMA. Like, I'm not leaving." And she goes, "You are such a hypocrite. You tell all your mentees and all these people that you talk to, like, try something different. It's healthy. It's good. It's going to make you think differently. You're going to grow and learn more." And coming off COVID, I thought she's right. So having that mirror was really
Hmm.
healthy for me. Her saying, "Hey, come on, like, try something." And you always say, "I'm going to miss the people," but the people that you care about, like you, Laura, like, we've stayed in touch,
Yeah.
right? And then you fall in love with the new folks. And at Department of Interior, at the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, I got to work with remarkable people that I really kind of fell in love with. And we built a great team and culture, and it was really fun. And then same thing, like, I
Yeah.
never thought I'd leave.
Right.
And the mirror, my wife says, "You're coming home." In the last couple of months, just for me, didn't feel right. And I was carrying a lot, in this current environment. It's a difficult time for federal employees. And as a federal leader, it was hard. It was hard.
Hmm.
And she said, in fact, it was a night of my son's last basketball game. I kind of snapped at him versus like any other
Yeah.
time I would say, "Hey, have a great season. Let's talk." And we would kind of talk about, recap the season and have fun and just say, "Great job, son." And I was so weighed down by the things we were doing at work, um, that I kind of snapped. And that was the point
Hmm.
where my wife says, "You need to go try something else."
Yeah.
Right. It's and nothing against anything. It was just not right for me. So
Yeah.
I started calling friends
Yeah.
and people I admire. And
Using that network.
yeah, and I'm fortunate to have some opportunities and have landed this one, and it's been really exciting. And yes, I miss the people, but guess what?
Yeah.
Like, I still in touch with the people that I really care
That's
about.
right. Yeah. Well, when you're figuring out, when you're kind of at that crossroads, right, of kind of figuring out what's next, because it's not like you had to go figure out what that was for you, right? Like what is the right next move?
Right.
What is your best, I mean, how did you approach that? Especially the path wasn't clear, right? It wasn't like, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do from here. This is what it's all led to. How do you figure that out? And what would you say to somebody else who's at a similar crossroads of just kind of figuring out what the next chapter looks like?
It's scary. Change is scary.
Yeah.
Um, but I have a great mentor. He's been mentoring me for years, and he said something that, I was not sure. Can I lead in a non-federal space? Can I make
Hmm.
the adjustment to the private sector? Is the private sector where I want to go? Is it academia or somewhere else?
Sure.
And he said, "Paul, how many times have you really failed in your life, in your career? You always adapt to figure it out, to
Hmm.
be successful in that. And success is defined in different ways, but you make it work, right? You figure it out." And that kind of gave me the courage to kind of say, like, I gotta trust that the things that have gotten to me to where I am are gonna work. And if they don't, they don't, right? So I think I would encourage folks to just say, take that leap of faith, have
Yeah.
confidence and trust in yourself. Think think with an optimistic and a positive mindset. Just talking about, like, I can do this. Like, this is exciting is different than, oh, it's scary. Like, what if
Hmm.
I fail? Like, what if this isn't right for me? And like, even your body posture changes when you use those different adjectives, right? And so
Just kind
that
of
was hard,
reframing the way you
right?
think about things, right?
It's hard unless what we control is our mindset and how
Hmm.
we think about things. And when we put a different spin on it, every opportunity is an exciting one. And I've really enjoyed it. It's
Yeah.
not without challenges, and I still feel like very uncertain about, like, what is this and what is that? But the cool thing about change, Laura, is it makes you mindful. We
Hmm.
get contented in our roles where, like, I know the stuff, I know the topics, I know the folks. And in today's day and age, you start getting distracted by your phone, you start doing other things. If you're new to something, it's a refreshing reset toward mindfulness.
Yeah.
Like, I'm constantly listening, I'm taking notes actively because everything's new. And when you do that, it's kind of like I leave the day going, gosh, it's kind of a fun day,
Yeah. You're
right?
learning so much all the time,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that's great. And you've been so full of good advice. You always are, Paul. But if you were to go back, I think it sounds like Jean's given you a lot of great advice. So I'm not going to ask you for the best piece of advice you've ever been given, because it would be hard to choose. But if you could go back and talk to young Paul
yeah,
at Roy Rogers in
yeah.
at the cashier at the cash register, what would you do? What would you tell yourself to, if you could go back in time, just to prepare yourself or excite yourself for what was to come?
I would say two things, Laura.
Yeah.
One is your life is a progression, and everything you're experiencing just becomes a portion of your fabric, right? It is something that you can build on and expand on, even if at the time it's like, oh man, this is really hard,
Hmm.
right? Or why is this happening? uh, it's a lesson that you get to put in kind of your toolkit, and then you get to pick and choose and learn and grow and develop from that. And I think about this because my parents were here yesterday. My dad's constant cleaning out his house, and then finding little things and going, hey, Paul, I found this little car, like it was like a driver's license from like when I was 16.
Your parents are like
Um,
my parents.
right, they hoard everything, and then but he's been cleaning out things, right? And when they moved a couple of years ago to and downsized, my dad gave me this folder, and in it, I came here to the U.S. when I was 4 from Taiwan.
Hmm.
We didn't speak a lick of English, and in it was a letter from my first grade teacher that said, "Paul's starting to get it. He's starting to understand what's happening in class, and his
Oh,
English is improving." Right? And I think about my Roy Rogers self. I was different. I looked
yeah.
different. I wasn't Chinese or Taiwanese enough. I wasn't American enough.
Yeah.
I was, and in your head at that moment throughout my childhood, I was like, this is, I come home and I speak Taiwanese to my parents.
Hmm.
Like, and the rest of society is speaking English. Right. And I thought it was a detriment. But you and I talk about storytelling and communications and how important that is for leadership. And you're a great communicator, Laura. Like, I fast forward and I go, gosh, the reason I can communicate well is because when you don't speak English as your first language, a big part of communications is body language. And
Yeah.
like you perceive that you get to observe that more. And I got to cultivate that as a child. And at the time, it felt like a weakness, but I was observing that the teacher wasn't happy, even if she was saying nice things, right?
Right.
Like, you got to simplify the language and tell
Hmm.
stories, because that's how I learned English, is storytelling and listening to stories and using simple language because my grammar is terrible, right? So
It
that at the time looks like a weakness to you. So I tell
becomes
the
a
young Paul,
challenge, right?
I would tell myself, these challenges actually might actually become strengths,
Yeah. I
right?
love that.
Yeah. The second thing I would say is risks. Like, we're so afraid. I'm so afraid to make a misstep. Um, but I think that's what I learned early in my career, is just be
Hmm.
inquisitive. If you're curious and use logic, I was asked in my first Fema job, I was in the IT shop kind of doing that technology. I didn't love it,
Sure.
but that was where I was.
Yeah.
But I would sit in meetings with engineers, and we would talk about levies and we talk about outreach. So I just started asking questions. That's taking risks, not being respectful. I'm not an expert in those areas, but asking questions. And before you know it, someone comes to me and says, why don't you lead our outreach and strategy team? And I thought, I'm not qualified to do that. They go, you have been, because you're taking enough risks to ask outside of your domain, to inquire, to try something different.
Yeah.
I would always be the first to volunteer for things too, kind of like that Roy Roger job. Um, Volunteer for things. And the more risks you take, the more inquisitive you are, the more whole you and more valuable you become to the enterprise. So
I love
I would
that.
tell myself, take risks, try
Take
different
risks.
things, and what you're afraid of now or you think are weaknesses actually could come around, and you're going to leverage those in your toolkit to be strengths.
To be your strengths. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're reminding me, Paul, of one of the biggest pieces of advice that stuck with me, and it wasn't unique to the person that said it to me, but it's just had such an impact, is that there's in discomfort, there's growth, right? You have to
Yeah.
be uncomfortable in order to grow. And I think we had really similar kind of journeys, almost, leaving FEMA and kind of forcing ourselves to feel that and being able to grow from that, whether it's growing your skill set, growing your network, growing, you're just growing in so many ways by taking those risks. So I appreciate that. I feel I could seriously just talk to you all day. It's been such a pleasure having you, and thank you so much for taking the time and spending this time with us and talking all about your career journey. It's been always such a good talk and hearing about all your different stories and insights.
Well, thank you, Laura. I mean, like, one, congratulations in taking the risk to do this. And I think it's really important and really powerful. And it's something that you have a great skill set to do. And mostly, I know you want to help people. So, in any way, if it helps folks think about their careers, I think it's a powerful thing.
Thank
You and
you.
I can continue to chat all day, and we will, I'm sure, offline. But congratulations. I wish you the best. And thanks for choosing me and having the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Paul. Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Careers and Coffee Talk. See you next time.